Hey everyone! Before we jump into today's powerful story, take a second to drop a comment below and let us know where you're watching from. Also, if you love thought provoking stories that make you think, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Now, get ready for a gripping, emotional, and eye opening story about a police officer who lets his biases get the best of him, only to end up humiliated when he realizes the truth. Let's get into it. The late evening sun bathed the quiet streets of Rockford, a small city in Illinois, with a golden hue. It was one of those nights where nothing seemed to happen, yet everything felt tense. Officer Randy Hewitt, tapped his fingers on the steering wheel of his patrol car, bored but alert. The radio crackled with minor disturbances, nothing worth his attention. He sighed, already thinking about his shift ending in 2 hours. Randy was a cop of 15 years, a man who prided himself on instinct. He believed he could spot trouble before it happened. To him, the streets spoke in signs, body language, subtle movements, the cars people drove. That night, his gut told him something was off. A sleek black Chevy Tahoe rolled past his patrol car, its windows tinted just enough to hide the faces inside. But Randy caught a glimpse. Two men, both large, both wearing black sunglasses. Even in the dimming light, something about them set off alarm bells in his head. He eased his patrol car into motion, tailing them from a distance. The SUV drove steadily, obeying every traffic rule, not a single misstep. And yet, something gnawed at Randy. He picked up the radio. Unit 12 to dispatch. Running a plate check on a black Chevy Tahoe. License number XJT 2094. A pause, then the voice of dispatch came back, crisp and professional. Unit 12, the vehicle is clean. No flags, no priors. Randy frowned. That didn't mean much. He'd seen criminals driving spotless vehicles before. He switched on his lights. The Tahoe slowed and pulled over immediately. No hesitation. That too felt strange. Most people reacted with either confusion or nervousness, sometimes even fear. But these men? Their response was too calm. Hand on his holster, Randy stepped out of his patrol car, his boots crunching against the pavement as he approached the driver's side. The window rolled down smoothly. Inside, two men sat silently. The driver was broad-shouldered, with a shaved head and sharp jawline. The passenger was just as imposing, his expression unreadable behind the dark lenses of his sunglasses. Neither looked the least bit concerned. That alone put Randy on edge. "License and registration," he demanded, his voice firm. The driver reached into the glove compartment and pulled out the requested documents, handing them over without a word. Randy skimmed the license. "David Carter," he read aloud before turning to the passenger. "And you?" The man didn't answer right away. Instead, he let out a small sigh, as if this were nothing more than a minor inconvenience. "James Holloway," he finally said, his voice deep and composed. Randy narrowed his eyes. Something about their posture, their confidence, it was unsettling. He flipped through the registration. Everything was in order. But still, something didn't sit right. "Where are you two headed?" he pressed. "Heading home," Carter answered, his tone neutral. "From where?" "A meeting," Holloway replied, offering nothing more. Randy's grip on the documents tightened. He had been on the force long enough to know when people were trying to keep things vague. He glanced back at the SUV's interior. Clean, no clutter, no visible weapons, nothing suspicious. But that didn't mean there wasn't something hidden. His jaw clenched. "Step out of the vehicle." Carter and Holloway exchanged a glance, their faces unreadable. Then, without argument, both men stepped out. Standing in front of Randy, they seemed even larger than before. Their presence was overwhelming, their posture upright, authoritative. But Randy didn't back down. He squared his shoulders, masking the unease creeping up his spine. "Hands on the hood," he ordered. Carter exhaled sharply but obeyed, placing his hands firmly on the SUV's hood. Holloway followed suit. Randy patted them down quickly but thoroughly. Nothing. No weapons, no drugs, no reason to hold them. But he wasn't done yet. You fit the description of some guys we're looking for, he said, knowing it was a stretch. Carter let out a low chuckle, shaking his head slightly. That's so, he murmured. Holloway, still facing forward, spoke up. What description is that, officer? Randy ignored the question, stepping back. Stay where you are. He returned to his patrol car, radioing in for backup. He wasn't sure why, but he wanted more officers present. Something about these men made him feel small, and he hated that. As he waited, he ran a quick check on their names. Seconds later, his screen blinked. His stomach dropped. For a moment, Randy just stared at the screen, his pulse hammering in his ears. David Carter, Special Agent, Federal Bureau of Investigation. James Holloway, Special Agent, Federal Bureau of Investigation. His throat went dry. He read the words again, hoping he'd somehow misread. But no. Right in front of him, clear as day, he had just pulled over 2 FBI agents. A cold wave of embarrassment crashed over him. Slowly, he lifted his gaze toward them. They were still standing by their SUV, waiting. Carter had turned his head slightly, watching him with an expression that was unreadable but unmistakably expectant. Holloway remained still, his fingers drumming lazily against the hood. Randy swallowed hard. What the hell was he supposed to do now? Backup was already on its way. If he called it off, it would look suspicious. If he went forward with the stop, he risked humiliating himself even further. His hand hovered over the radio. Before he could decide, Carter spoke. Find anything interesting, officer? Randy forced himself to stay composed, stepping back out of his vehicle. He cleared his throat, gripping the license and registration a little too tightly. Why didn't you just say you were FBI? His voice carried an edge, masking the embarrassment creeping up his neck. Holloway finally turned to look at him. Why should we have to? He countered smoothly. Randy stiffened. His gaze flickered between them, searching for some crack in their confidence, something to make him feel like he was still in control, but there was none. You profiled us, Carter said, his voice calm but firm. You saw 2 black men in a nice car, wearing sunglasses at night, and decided we must be criminals. Randy opened his mouth, but no words came. Was the Tahoe reported stolen? Holloway asked. No. Any warrants under our names? No. Did we break any traffic laws? Randy felt his face burn. No. Carter shook his head. But you still called for backup, didn't you? The silence that followed was suffocating. The weight of the situation pressed down on Randy's chest like a concrete slab. He had spent years justifying his instincts, believing he was always on the right side of the law. But now, standing in front of 2 federal agents, he couldn't shake the realization that he had been caught in his own bias. The sound of approaching sirens cut through the air. Backup was almost here. Carter and Holloway shared a glance. Then, without another word, Carter held out his hand. Our IDs. Randy hesitated, then handed them back. His fingers brushed against Carter's for the briefest moment. His grip was steady, unwavering. As the flashing lights of additional patrol cars came into view, Holloway leaned in slightly. His voice was low, measured. You might want to explain to your team why you pulled over 2 federal agents for looking like criminals. Then, with a nod to Carter, he turned, climbed back into the SUV, and started the engine. Randy stood frozen as the Tahoe pulled away, his own reflection staring back at him in the rear windshield. The officers from the backup units rushed up to him, confused and ready for action. What's the situation? One of them asked. Randy took a deep breath, his fists clenching at his sides. Nothing, he muttered. False alarm. But as the taillights of the FBI agent's car disappeared into the night, he knew this wasn't just a mistake. It was a lesson, one he wouldn't soon forget.